Hey everybody, we finally cracked the tech. I'm hoping it's working. I had to change browser. That seemed to be the problem because I was on Safari, the Mac thing, and it was telling me to do Chrome when I tried to do the live myself. So that's a learning for all of us. Anyway, it's lovely to see you, well, virtually, and talk about my book, which launched on Tuesday. So I had a chat with Nicole a few minutes ago, and she really wanted me to talk you through the book itself and what the experience was like for me. But I also really want to talk to you about the process of writing a book and the things that I learned along the way. So I'll start a little bit with the story of how this came to happen. So I've always been a writer, a journalist, a coach, and a counselor. And sorry, I'm getting something a little confusing now because Nicole's live on Safari, so I'm really not sure what's going on. So we're both live.
Hi guys, it's Nicole from the Writing Tribe. I'm so sorry about this. We're having some technical difficulties trying to get Alison on here. I am now going to be in my main group, in my main Facebook page, and then I'll share it with the Writing Tribe. So you might see it come up on a different
listening
page.
to what Nicole's saying.
I apologise profusely for this, but for some reason it's just not playing ball at all. So, hi Lynn. I am just.
Oh, Beth, you can see it. Thank you.
Alison
Wonderful.
Now live in the Writing Tribe. I apologise.
Okay.
I am going right now.
Go away, Nicole.
In the Writing Tribe right now. Don't miss
Come and join me. Come and join me. Yeah. So anyway, another amazing technical story. So back to. Oh gosh, I can hear something in the background as well. It's chaos. So sorry, I have to turn off Safari so that I can not hear that. Right, everyone, deep breath, because I now need to relax. That's something I did learn in the process of having breast cancer, is that just when everything's coming at you, it's the breath that helps you calm down and be at peace. So back to the story. Writer, journalist, coach, counselor. So, and I've always been interested in spiritual psychology and the deeper meaning of life, really. And of course, alternative health and complementary medicine. I used to be the publicity director for Element Books, which was a sort of spirituality and lifestyle publisher. So Nicole and I, of course, worked together at the Home Office, and she rightly said it was the worst job we ever had. We're in a private group, I think we could say that. So about 2015, I was about to go on holiday, and I had had a really, really busy time at work, and I reached for something to pack, and I noticed that my breast, my right breast, felt quite solid. So it wasn't a lump or anything, it just felt really hard. And so I immediately, of course, checked the other one, and the texture was completely different. So then I went to see the doctor, who then referred me to a clinic, and that's the process. If there's anything suspicious, you'll be immediately referred to a clinic, a specialist breast clinic. So they then biopsy, did mammograms and all of that, and which, by the way, that's another point. I had a clear mammogram 3 months before I was diagnosed. And at the time that they found my tumor, it was about 10 centimeters, or they estimated it to be 10 centimeters, the size of an orange. So I had a completely clear mammogram with a tumor that size. And that's because my particular type of cancer, which is invasive lobular cancer, doesn't show up well on a mammogram. And also dense breast tissue doesn't show up well on a mammogram. So that's something you need to be aware of. Anyway, so I went off on holiday. In the biggest test of mindfulness known to man, I had to keep calm because I could have ruined a holiday if the diagnosis had been completely different. But I came back. I had my first surgery to remove the tumor, and unfortunately that was not successful. They have to get something they call clear margins, which means that in the tissue that they've taken away, there's no evidence of disease on the edges. And so that didn't happen. And their next reaction is always immediately to go to mastectomy. I think if I had my time over again, I might have fought that a little more. But I did that, and they did get clear margins, and all they found in the remaining tissue was 6 millimeters of cancer. So I lost my breast for 6 millimeters of cancer. In terms of treatment, I personally, I chose not to have chemo or radiation. I did all the things that you could possibly do to support your immune system to deal with the disease, and supplements. I took something called the grease test, which is quite expensive, but they take a lot of blood and they test your circulating cancer cells against a panel of drugs that include chemo drugs, but also supplements and other treatments like intravenous vitamin C, hypothermia, just to see what is the most effective, and how each of these treatments affects your particular type of cancer. Because I wanted something specific. What you don't realize is that cancer treatment is an inexact science. When I asked about rounds of chemo, I said, well, how will you know that it's working? Will you do X amount and then stop and test or anything? And the answer was, well, in clinical trials, if we give 24 rounds, then we know that X amount of people survive. So it's that inexact. So I chose to go a different way. And I also chose to support myself on every level. So physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And out of that came the book. I didn't write. Interestingly, as a writer, I didn't write. Lots of people blog and tell their story as it's happening. But for me, I'm more reflective. So I was paying attention to what was going on, living the experience, but I wasn't writing about it. That came later. But all the way along, I thought, because I went looking for the book, that I could just pick up a book and go, these are the types of disease. I didn't even know that there were different types of breast cancer. I thought it was just one thing. These are the types of disease. This is what you're going to be offered. These are the side effects. These are the special diets that you should be going on. This is how you support yourself in dealing with the emotional trauma of it. And that is what most people don't realize, is it is so frightening to be facing a cancer diagnosis that it's incredibly emotionally wearing. So it drives your mind is all over the place emotionally. Everything feels emotionally draining and incredibly stressful. You don't realize that everyone's going to give you their opinion on what you should be doing. And that really doesn't feel particularly helpful, especially if you've decided what you're going to do. And then everyone chimes in. It doesn't feel like support. It feels like an attack. And that's something I would really love everyone to be aware of. If they're dealing with somebody who's got cancer, then it's really, you must listen and take your cue from them about what they're interested in hearing about. You can support them and you can go looking for treatments. If they say, oh, I need to research something, will you help me? Or you could offer to do that. But what you can't do is go in and say, I think you should do this. So that's really important. Anyway, so there I was dealing with it on all these various levels. And then that was 2015. So here we are in 2018. Last year, I had my reconstructive surgery. And that was something called a DF flap, where they take a section of your stomach and make a new breast out of it, a new breast shape. So I had that treatment. And there was a delay in having that treatment. And I had very large breasts. And I had to live with one very large breast for about 2.5, nearly 3 years. So that was incredibly uncomfortable for me. And I had to learn to live with the disfigurement of it and come to terms with the changes in my body. Because right now, I can tell you, I am a train track of scars everywhere, right across my stomach, both breasts, because the other one had to be brought down to match. And yet I learned something from all these various surgeries, that when you first have something that's quite disfiguring, you're so obsessed by it and the scars seem really terrorizing and angry red scars. And yet a year later, it's a thin silver line. And one of the scars that I obsessed about so much in the beginning, I don't even know where it is now. I can't see it. So that's what I would say to anyone who's going through this and is worried about the bodily changes that they're going through, is that time, it does heal it. You become more comfortable with your body the way that it is. And I would say that actually I'm much more comfortable with my body now, especially after spending so much time in hospitals where you've got so many doctors coming through. It's like, coach parties welcome. So I have no shame now to stand up in a room with a bunch of doctors and just say, okay, fine, take a look, who cares? So, it has some upsides. So that's the story. And then there was a delay on the reconstruction, and it was because they found something on my adrenal gland, which the first hospital knew about, but they hadn't communicated it to the second one. So that made the second one think, well, we need to investigate this. And that cost me another 6 months because they were being very thorough. So in the process of doing that, I decided that I would have to do, and this is how I dealt with a lot of delays and struggles during this process, was if I cannot do what I wanted to do, what can I do that I couldn't have done if that had gone forward? So I went to the Hay House Writers Workshop, and as part of that, you get a chance to submit your book proposal to the publishers, and they run a competition with an advance, and one person is given a contract and the advance at the end of the workshop. So this is what you have to put in the proposal. It takes a few months. And anyway, so I won. So that's how I got my book contract. And I would recommend to anyone, if you have an idea for a book and it's non-fiction, because Hay House really doesn't do fiction. So I would say that sorry, my glasses are like, going crazy. I would say, even though learning how to do a book proposal is really useful, this is particularly good for non-fiction proposals. So they have a workshop, and I think it's either October or November, and there are still places available. So if it really is a great chance to get in, to learn how to write a book proposal, and then to get in front of a publisher, because that is not so easy these days. Most publishing houses will not take cold submissions. You've either got to know someone, you've got to find an agent. Then even finding an agent can be really difficult. So this is a rare opportunity to have a bit of a writing workshop, learn how to do a proposal, and then potentially either win the competition, or, as in every year, they often have people who they offer contracts to anyway. So that's the story of the book. And then in the process of writing the book, so I was just talking about this with Nicole. I write professionally as a copywriter, and a lot of my work is really, really short stuff. It is character count. I would say some of the character counts I work at are like 75 characters, 150, 200, 700. Really, for products, these are really, really small character counts where the words that you choose have to convey an immense amount of information. And even if you get it almost right and you're one character over, you have to rewrite it until you get it absolutely right and bang on character count. So my mind was always now, although I wrote feature articles, but most of those were probably 1,200 to 1,500 words. All of a sudden, I was going to write a book of 50,000 words. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to the writing the proposal first, because also that was initially a struggle for me, because within the proposal, they want you to submit at least 1 to 2, 3,500 word chapters. So let's just clear up this misunderstanding that you have to have written a book to go to a publisher. In the proposal, they just want to see a sample of your writing, and they want to understand what it is that you're writing about, and that you have a clear understanding of your market. So you have to write a table of contents. You need to plot out each of the chapters to, let's say a couple of paragraphs describing what's going into each chapter. Then you have to give your sample chapters. You have to do a comparative analysis of all the other books that are in the market in your genre. You have to have a marketing plan. This is the other advantage, by the way, of going into the writer's workshop. And I'm sorry if it sounds like a sales pitch for them. It isn't. But it's just simply that most publishing houses will not look at you if you don't have at least 5,000 followers on Facebook or Instagram or wherever. Whereas if you go to the writer's workshop, the platform, as they call it, doesn't matter. They're interested in the writing. So I did the proposal, and that was really an amazing effort to get that together, because the proposal is what crystallizes your ideas. Getting that structure right in the first place is the most important thing. I love winging it. That's my big thing. Nicole will probably tell you that. You know, I would just go straight into something and write. I don't sit down and plot things out, but it really taught me to do that. And when I did write the book much later on, the chapters where I hadn't been wildly clear about what I was going to do were the ones that caused me the most trouble. I wish that I had really gone into that process very, very deeply at the beginning, because then when you have the structure in place, you have the opportunity to just riff off, write what you need to write. And that in some ways is very freeing. So structure, for me, doesn't bind you or stop you from doing anything. It gives you freedom. Once you've created that kind of safe space that you know what the topic is that you're going to cover, you know the details, then off you go. Some chapters are easier than others. I mean, my natural bent, although I did do a lot of research, was on the psychological side and on the coaching side, with all the emotional support, mental support, and also finding meaning and transformation in the process. That for me was the real juice in my book that I loved to write. The chapters on treatment, because they needed to be so well researched and accurate, that took a lot of time and it was not fun to write. But then I had to go back in the editing process because I felt, well, not enthused about it. So I wanted to go back and put some more energy into those chapters. So I did that in editing. So talking about editing, I'm going to say editing, writing, two different headspaces, don't ever mix them. I think Hemingway said was write drunk and edit sober. He's entirely right. You have, for writing is right brain, editing is left brain. So when you try to mix them, you blow a tire in terms of your flow, your creative flow. Go back later, write what you need to write, and then go back later. And also the distance, when you step away from your own writing and you go back for a couple of days later, you can see your repetitions. You can see mistakes. You can see where perhaps you've changed tenses. That little thing that I posted up today, that's so true. Like, you get into the writing flow and then you realize that you've really shifted things around and perhaps haven't paid attention. And there are repetitions that you had no idea were in there, because we've all got our favorite words. Mine's fabulous, by the way. That will pop up in pretty much everything that I do. So yeah, so it's getting that structure right. And I'm sorry, I've just seen a comment pop up. So, oh, great, Maureen. I'm really, really glad that you're enjoying it. And Naomi, thank you for enjoying the Hemingway quotation. The other Hemingway quotation that I was talking about with Nicole just before this chat was, it's easy to write. You just sit at a typewriter and bleed. And we were talking about the difference between stream of consciousness and emotional writing. Stream of consciousness has no structure, just simply is getting something out. But what really touches people is getting to the heart of your story, expressing that emotion so that it comes alive on the page. Now, in my book, it's in 3 sections. So in the beginning, you have the bit about the treatment. In the middle, you have all the sort of coaching and practical self-care support. In the third part, you have um, reconstruction, life after cancer. And I wrote an entire chapter for family and friends on how to be truly helpful and truly supportive. So all of those different sections I introduced with my own personal stories. I didn't want to write a memoir. To be honest, I don't enjoy them, not in this particular genre. I enjoy life memoirs, but in the sort of health and personal story arena, not so much, because if you're coming to a book for information, sometimes it's frustrating to just read somebody's diary notes about what they did that day. It isn't that interesting. And that's what you have to convince yourself about, and really ask yourself the question, is this interesting for someone to read? It might have been how I felt at the time, but is it going to take them into your journey and your story? And I really hope that the little stories that open up each chapter touch the people who read them, so that they can understand that it's going to be a shared experience for them if they're suffering breast cancer. And if they're not, if they're a supportive person, then they can understand what their loved one is going through. So I would be very careful, if you're writing nonfiction and it's clearly self-help, about how you use those stories. Use them economically, use them in the right place, because not everyone can share your experience. It has to be something very emotional and a universal feeling. And I'm going to go back now to tone of voice, because that, I think, for most people starting out writing, and especially if you come from a background where you're writing for business, your tone is very professional. But when you're writing a book, and especially a self-help book, it needs to be engaging, and you need to have a strong voice. People need to be able to read it and feel you leaping off the page at them. And a lot of people who are starting out to write don't have the confidence to really go with their own voice and say exactly how they feel. So that's something I would encourage you to do, is really know what your voice is. Some people are really chatty. They write kind of really, really long copy. For me, I write pretty tight. I like to, clean things up and make them very, very simple. And I'm constantly moving. I'm very clear on how I say things, and I say them in my own way. I love a good bit of alliteration, by the way. So you'll see a lot of that if you read anything that I've written. That's me. That's how I do it. Doesn't mean everyone else has to, but that is my voice. Then when I go back to edit it, I'm trying to read it as the reader. I'm trying to see, can they understand what I'm talking about? Have I assumed knowledge that they may not have? Because I've been so immersed in my subject, perhaps I haven't explained clearly. So this is something that you can do for yourself. This is also something that your editor will do. If you go with a publishing house, then your editor will also raise questions about whether or not you've assumed a piece of knowledge that the reader might not have. So again, on editing, there's a thought. When you submit to your publisher, you will be given an editor. And I think it's really, really important that you have a good discussion with them first. You understand with them, there's clear instructions from the commissioning editor to the line editor who's going to work with you on how much of an edit they're expecting. With mine, it was light. They were not expecting to. It was simply really to lay it out for publication, not to change the tone of voice. They really liked the tone of voice. So it was really only small changes. But you need to be working in concert with your editor so that they can preserve your tone of voice, and perhaps even if they're really good, they can learn to amplify it. it's really important not to flatten your voice in your book. That doesn't mean that things don't get changed. They will, but the voice is important. That feeling of you being very present in your writing is hugely important. And so I think for me, in terms of writing time, I'm going to say it was actually written, I was recovering from reconstructive surgery. So I intend to start writing in October, the remainder of the book, for a January, end of like Christmas, January delivery. That didn't work out because I was really not feeling that well in October. And in fact, much of the way through November as well. So I did some stuff in October, but then I had to leave it for a bit, pick it up again in November, go back to, let it go, come back to it. That book was largely written in the space of about 2 months. But that was because it was structured before I got to it. Had it not been, it would have taken a lot longer. And also the other thing that you have to do, when I submitted, there were 2 things that I changed and said, hang on a second, I'm going to come back and change these things. I added. At the end of the chapters that were very practical, I created little checklists so that people could easily find the things that they needed to know in each section. So that was a little practical thing. And the other thing I did was I read some research just after I'd submitted that said that fewer than 10% of women feel positive about life after treatment, which is such a shockingly low figure that I really wanted to add something on life after cancer to give some support in that area. So that brings us back to the flow of the book. So you have your structure, which I think of as a kind of vertical spine. Every bone hangs from another bone and it all hangs together. And there is a logical movement to it. But then also you have a kind of, I like to think of it as a horizontal transformation. Because in self-help, we're trying to bring transformation to someone. So that story is taking you from the original treatment, then all the way through to life after cancer. So you want to make sure that your story is going to finish, that you have the classic beginning, middle, and end. That's so important because a lot of people really don't understand story. Of course, I'm preaching to the converted here on Facebook because people actually do. Here, you guys understand story, but most people don't. Oh, Maureen, I've just seen that you had a reconstruction that went wrong, and it is, so difficult. That's one of the things that this whole process teaches us, and that is resilience. We go through so much, and life doesn't stop. So you might be going through breast cancer, but you'll also have deaths. You may have job loss. You may have other friends who are ill that you need to support. You may have, as Maureen had, a reconstruction that didn't work. And every time I'm going to say the biggest thing in this book is that you must feel your emotional pain. You cannot get to joy if you haven't expressed the pain. You cannot get to positivity unless you express negativity. You've got to be able to let it go, because otherwise you'll be doing what I've always heard PR described as putting the icing on the shit. You can't do it. This whole process is here to help you to let go. This book is here to help you deal with the trauma from your life, as well as trauma that you accumulate in going through the process of having breast cancer. You do not come out of a life-threatening disease without a change. And that's the transformation that I talk about in my book, is when life is in really, really short supply, you get very intentional. When you don't know if you're going to survive this, you want to make your time count. And when you do survive it, you really want to make your time count. And regardless of what's happened and what is happening and what continues to happen, because shit continues to happen, now you strive to create meaning out of your life. And as writers, we're observers. We see what's going on. We experience what's going within us, going on around us, what's happening to us. We dive in, and then we return our report back to the world. If you've ever read The Hero's Journey, that's the process. You come back to the world with the gift after all the trials, and you may go to the trials willing or unwilling. There is a call. And that's the process of cancer too. I speak a lot in my book about unhelpful character traits that you have. There's a doctor in the States who's written about his 30 years of cancer experience and recognizing personality traits within those cancer patients. And I've adapted that for women with breast cancer because it's really about nourishing the self. That's why this book is about self-care. And yeah, Nicole, I can see what you mean. We're brought up to soldier on and just get on with it. Absolutely. My mother was famous for that. It's like, no, don't worry if you're sick, you'll feel better when you get there. And I lived my life like that. And I don't anymore. So I think that's probably all that I can give you today. But I hope that's really been helpful. If anyone's got any more questions, chip in now, because anything about the writing process particularly, because I really love to encourage people to write. If you haven't seen Julia Cameron's Morning Pages, where you write 3 pages of just, that is stream of consciousness. So you get up in the morning, the first thing you do is just write 3 pages of whatever is on your mind. And that really helps you. And it helps you to clear, to download what's on your mind, to clear your mind so that you can then go on to write something creative. Those pages are not for looking back and coming up with ideas or for strategizing. They're simply a brain dump. Doing that when you're going through a stressful period, doesn't have to be breast cancer, anything. Doing that really helps you clear your mind. So I recommend in my book for people who are going through breast cancer, just write 1 page, because when you're ill, 3 pages is a big ask. But that 1 page will help you get rid of a load of stress so that later on, if you want to, you can actually sit down and creatively write, creatively express yourself, and also really think about what you want to do in your life, how you want to create your life. So Morning Pages, people. And then after Morning Pages, what I tend to do is I like to meditate. So after Morning Pages, that's the brain clearing, brain dumping. Then meditation is for just like really feeling not present in your body. I like to use meditation to feel not mindfully disconnected from your body, but actually very present in it, using that breath to really be here, be in the here and now, then do some meditation to feel inspired, and then to write a page or 2 about whatever's come up in the meditation. And you can get some amazing ideas that way. And also what Nicole and I talked about the other day when she had her Facebook Live, the bath. I can't tell you how many bits of chapters came to me while I'm sitting in the bath. Of course, I didn't have a pen and paper or whatever. And I was sitting there frantically going, right, I must remember this. I must remember this. And then leaping out of the bath and writing things down. So it's just really anything that's really a little bit of a meditative space is amazing for creativity. So I'm just going to leave you with that, unless I can see any more questions. Oh, hang on. See if there's any more questions coming through. And yeah, Maureen, yeah, go for 3 pages if you can do it. But if you are not, if you're struggling already, done is better than perfect. Do 1, just 1. Or on a bad day, go, I'm going to write a paragraph because illness teaches us to be receptive to our bodies, receptive to how we feel. And that's what self-care is just paying attention to what your body needs, what your mind needs, what your spirit needs. So give it what it needs. Don't give it heavy deadlines. Don't commit to something. And that's the other thing. I'm going to give this other analogy, which I really love. When you're struggling with something or you're trying to create space for yourself to write, it's really important to think of yourself and the orbit that's around you. So if you're the sun, then the orbit of the planets around you, the people who are really supportive are the ones that you keep close. The people who are really opinionated, or if you showed them your writing or told them what treatment choice you're going to have, they're going to have an opinion. Keep them at arm's length. Keep them further away. Just keep your circle tight. Circle the wagons. Your creativity is such a tender thing to preserve. Julia Cameron calls it, I think, gentle mirrors or reflective mirrors, kind mirrors, something like that. That yes, don't show your work to people who you know are highly critical, because they're probably highly critical to themselves. They're going to be like that to you. So just show your work to the people, like in a group like this, people who are going to be supportive and understand how difficult it is to put a knife in your heart, spill it on the page, and then show it to people. I mean, for me, this is going to be the most hilarious part of having a book. When I was doing the audio recording of the book, I was sitting there with the producer next door, and I'm talking about all the operations to my breasts, how I felt or whatever. And this guy is sitting next to me listening to the whole thing. And it felt so bizarre that at the end of that book, he knew more about me than most of my friends. Now, a lot of people around the world are going to know a lot more about me and details that I probably would not normally share with people than people who are really close. So it's understanding that, yeah, you're really putting yourself out there and being proud of yourself for being able to do that. And the satisfaction, I'm going to throw one final tip in, and that is about the satisfaction of serving. It's really hard to get past your own limiting beliefs, your own really bad habits, your own internalized criticism of sitting there looking at your work and deciding that it's terrible or it's not good enough or that no one's going to want to read it. What got me through, because I had never written a book before. Many, many other things, but not a book. What got me through was knowing that I was writing it for someone. I was writing it to help someone. Now, whether you're writing to entertain or to directly help someone, just put those people in your vision when you're writing. Set yourself aside. It's who are you trying to communicate to? What are you trying to share? Your self-worth isn't part of the equation. It's not part of the writing equation. It's you being creative in order to entertain, support, educate, whatever it is that you mean, that's what it's there for. So put your insecurities aside, focus always on who does this serve. And that, my friends, I'm sure will bring you success. Thank you for listening. Sorry for the tech stuff. I'm going to head off now. And it's been wonderful. And I'll give a final flash of my book, Stronger Than Before. And that, in the title, that's the transformation. That's the promise. That's what we're all trying to offer to someone, is a transformation, a healing, an entertainment, whatever. But, titles are a story for another day, because that one took a long time to come. Anyway, thank you very much. Talk to you soon.